Hi everyone. So today we're going to create an automation to capture emails that you receive from your buyers and then store it in Notion. So example of here we have is my Gumroad sales. So every time I receive a sales from Gumroad, so for example, you can see new sales from Notion automations. And then once I scroll to the bottom, so there's this new customer's email address. So Thomas at digital-cookie.com. So every time there's a new purchase, I want to store this into Notion. So how can we do that? So before we go into the technical details, just on a high level ideas of how this process can work. So for example, so when every time we receive an email, so for the first thing we have to do is we have to identify the email sender. So for example, in our case, the email sender would be someone like, for example, is from Gumroad. So this is something that we call validations. Just want to check. So that could be another example. Maybe like you want to check the email subject as well. So in our case, I wouldn't include it, but it might be a case that you want to check the email subject as well, just to make sure that it matches what you're looking for. And then if it doesn't match either of them, then it become no. So it means that the automation wouldn't do anything. So Zapier will just skip it. And then if it's yes, so what would happen is that you copy the email content. So in our case, we want to copy the email address, right? And then I create a new entry in Notion just to store it. So how does it look like in Notion? So I'll show you now. Okay, so coming into Notion, so here's the flow that I've already built earlier. So we're gonna start one by one again, but for now I'm just going to show how it actually works. Okay, now to show you how it works. So basically, you just click on this, and then test action. So let me just do a quick action test. You can see sending the database item from uh, Notion, email to Notion, and then it succeed. So we can go and check in our Notion now. So you can see it's being added here. So this is how we can say that it's being created. So just to check one more time, you can see the created date match today. So 7:50, 7:50. All right. So we're gonna show you how you can actually build this in Zapier right now. So first of all, you haven't used Zapier before. You need to create a new account in Zapier. So you can either use your Google account or just create a new one. And then for Zapier, they have a free plan that you can use. I think you have up to 100 runs for the free ones. So if it's like for small process, let's say you make like 10 or 50 sales every month, so it shouldn't be a problem. You can just use this for free. And then for this use case, so first thing we need to do is just find a Gmail. So left side Gmail, and then right side is Notion. So the idea is that we want to have receive something from Gmail, right? And then we want to pass it to Notion. So that's why you can see this connection here. And then when this happen, so you have to select a trigger. So how do you, the automation know, Zapier knows when it should start? So in this case, they actually provide quite a lot of helpful guides here, which is why normally I encourage for new starter or beginner to use Zapier because they have more options. So in this case, we would like to use new email matching search. So the idea is that we want to search the email based on the subject, and then in the future, maybe you want to base on the email address as well. So in this case, we select new email matching search. And then when you match a certain subject or email address, what will happen? So then do this. So in our case, you select Notion. So there are a lot of options here, like create page, database items, find database item, page. So what are the differences? So just a quick introductions in terms of database, right? So for some of you that may be a little bit more new to Notion, so there are two few differences for Notion itself. So you can see it here. We have something called email list, right? And you can see there's a table here. So once you see like there's a table, there's a gallery, or even for example, board, list, calendar. So these are all database. And then every items you create new is called like a new item or database. And what do they mean by page? So when it comes to page, it means that once you open the database, so there's one entry. So this is a page. So anything that you type in here, so this is a page. So if you want to do something like, for example, you want to include the email inside this page itself. So let's say like you have like email list, then email one, email two, email three. So this is the case where you select add into a page instead of a database item. But for our use case, we want to include in a database. So you select the database item. So now just get back to Zapier. Yep, and then we select the action. You can see there's a create a page, find item. So in our case, we just create database item and then just like try it. All right. So by default, you can see there's two things created for you here. So one is the Gmail, one is Notion. So once you can just click it here to expand it. So for the beginning, what you need to do is you have to select your own account. So if you're new, you have to log into your Google account. So you have to provide access to Zapier so that they have access to the automations. So since I already set it up previously, I'll just select my own account here. And then for you, you can just log in and then just select your Gmail account. And then we select continue. So here, there's something called search string. So this is what I mentioned earlier on how you can try to find, for example, the email address or the subject. So they actually have quite a helpful guides here on how you can use it. So let's just click on it. So once you expand, then for example, so from who? So from Amy, from David, or maybe from an email address. And then they have something like in in basically means like inbox subject. And then like you can type up the subject here. So if you want more example, so they have a more here. So you can see like even more specific examples here. So let's see. In our case, we want to have maybe, for example, from the email, right? So let me see. Is there any from? So in this case, we want to find the sender, right? So in our case, we can just use from, and then we can put the email address. Okay, so let me just go back to Zapier. So from, and then I can type the email address that one. So Thomas at digitalcookie.com. So in this case, because it's a testing scenario, so I wouldn't put Gumroad for the from. But in your case, if you need it, you can do it. And then after that, you want to add more. I think you can just use and then you can do like, for example, subject, and then just type out what's the subject here. But in our case, we don't need it, so we just leave this out. Okay, you can press continue, and then continue again. So you can see like it's trying to read our email now. So just do a test trigger, and you can see we found an email. So they found the emails. So in this case, they read the email that I showed you earlier. So you made a sell, $5, and then email address is thomas at digitalcookie.com. So this is the email that we want to capture. And then just select continue. And then the second part is they ask you to select Notion. So in this case, you have to log into your Notion account as well. So every time you select it, they actually ask you to continue. And then because you can see that mine directly go to the database, right? So I can just select this. And then you can see that there's a lot of database for me here. So what we need is just the email list. So for you, if you're the first time, right? So there will be a prompt for you to select it from Notion itself. So in case the prompt doesn't work for you, so just to show you another example. So another way you can add Zapier support to Notion is that you can go back to the database. So what you need to do is just go to this three dot at the right side, select it, and then the bottom here, so you can see like connections. So in my case, I already have Zapier as the connections that are being set up. So for you, like you might need to add new connections, right? This is where you can kind of add new one. So just go to add connections and then select new connections here. All right. And then, so let's go back to Zapier. So now I've already selected my database email list. And then what I need to do is I want the automations to fill in the subject in an email. So if I select the subject, you can see like there's a lot of options here. So you can click show more options. There's even more. So we can go through one by one just slowly. So body plain basically means the body of the email address itself. So in this case, let me just show an example. So in this case, this will be the body. So you have the you made a cell, you have the image here, you have the $5. So that's the body. And then can go to next one you see. You have the date, so when it's being sent, and then you have the subject, and then you have the from who, so who's the email sender, and then you have this thing called body HTML. So every time when our email is being sent, there's like a format, like for example, there's enter, there's a bracket, there's bold. So there's actually a HTML text being used. That's the formatting that's being used by email. So when you select this body HTML, right? So you have all these links and things like that. So normally you wouldn't need to use this, so we can just skip this. Then there have your attachments where you can have the file, you have from the email, and then there are a lot of different things that you can go down. But for in our case, so since we are in the subject property, right? So what we need to do is just find subject. So it already show you like a preview of what the subject is like. So just select subject. Okay. And then the email. So we want to capture the email, right? But then there's a problem here. So because the email is in the body, right? So Zapier doesn't automatically help you to capture the emails inside the body itself. So what you need to do is actually you need one more step. So in that case, before you copy the data into Notion, you need to somehow find the email address within the email body. So in this case, right, let's go back to the email. So you can see here from Notion, Gmail itself. So we want Zapier to help us find, so where is the email address? So it's here. So we want Zapier to be able to identify the email address that is available is here. So in this case, we go to Zapier. And then before anything happens, before we copy to Notion, so we have a plus button here, just in between. Just select the plus. And then there's a lot of different options here. So normally you can select like different interactions instead of just Gmail to Notion, right? In between, you can have other different actions as well. For example, we can upload documents to or archive your emails into Google Drive, or you can do other different things like send Twitters, update on calendar, so on different things. But in our case, we're gonna do is select format. So basically, it's change how incoming data is being formatted. So just select this, and then they'll ask you to choose an event. So there's an event here. You have different ways you can try to change the data. So you have date and time, numbers, text, utilities. So in our cases, so we look at text. So we work with text data to find and replace, capitalize, remove HTML, and more. So it's able to help us to find specific text that we want. So just select text and then continue, and then transform. So this is another good thing about Zapier is that it has a lot of ways for you to find data, and then a lot of them is already being pre-built. So for example, here we want to extract email address. So it's actually here. So a lot of like competitors, like for example, Make itself, like you need to type in a few more lines of formulas or codes just to find it. It's not that difficult. But then just for Zapier itself, right? It has actually already written it for you. So it just makes it a lot easier for like new starter beginners to use. So yeah, in our case, we just select extract email address, and then they would like to know text you would like to find and copy an email address from. So in our case, we want to find the text, the input. So we select body plane. So we want to find the text from the body. So the reason why you don't select, let's say for example, body HTML, right? So normally I don't think there's an issue with that. It's just that since we don't really need all these codes inside, right? So we just select body plane and then continue. So you can see that's reading the data now. So select task action. Okay, you can see it's already given us the output of Thomas at digital-cookie.com, even though we didn't actually do anything. Zapier actually do all the hard work for us just to find the email address. So that's it. Just select continue. And then once we continue, right, it goes back to Notion. So now that we already have our email address, so you can select setup action again. So this is for the subject. And then for our email address, so we can select email and then text in formatted by Zapier and then just put the output. And there you have it. So now we have the subject, we have the output. You can select continue. And then for the last steps, just task action. just make sure the automation is working. So for now, before we start again, let me just delete these two examples. And then we go back to Zapier and then select task section. And then we go to Notion. You can see it's being created 804. So yeah, that's how you create this email list automations. So once you're done, you can go back to Notion. You can go back to Zapier and just select publish. And so yeah, there you have it. Thanks for watching.